Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Spectral Force, returning for the next installment of Deliberating Halo. Sorry it took so long, but I really didn't know what I wanted to discuss next, because there's so much you could possibly discuss, and I was thinking about doing a video that was compiling all the potential downsides of Halo 5, but that's just a long video to make, and I tried making it. It was long, because I had a lot to say, so you know what, I'm going to split it up into smaller videos, which means maybe some things won't get discussed on their own because they're too small of topics. So today I'm just going to stick with something that is more than worthy of its own topic. Spartan Abilities. Oh man, we've all heard that word and we've all heard it discussed to death on the forums, YouTube comments, wherever you discuss Halo, people are talking about these abilities. First and foremost, we're going to talk about ground pound. I've seen some mixed opinions on ground pound, but to be honest, it's not even an issue. It's something that you will often use to sacrifice your tactical advantage of high ground in order to potentially get a kill, maybe rarely multiple kills. But what happens even after you pull off that one kill? You're left out in the open on lower ground than you were before, which means in competitive play, we're not going to see people spamming ground pound, although I do look forward to see how more skilled players utilize this to make some really awesome plays, and oh boy, we're going to see all those montages, trust me. But ground pound is a non-issue, it's kind of a gimmicky thing. The game would be more or less viewed the same with or without it. I think it's just a cool thing they added in because they wanted to make the suit seem cooler. They want you to feel more like a Spartan with this awesome technology in the future. It's a gimmick that really doesn't hurt the game, and it doesn't especially help it either. It's a non-issue. I'd say, please, do not worry about it. Next up is the aiming down sights, also known as Smart Scope. And you know what, they can call it whatever they want. Smart Scope is just a fancy name, because, they don't want to call it aiming down sights, because they knew everyone would immediately be up in arms, grabbing their pitchforks, freaking out because they see the word aiming down sights or iron sights or whatever you want to call it. Smart Scope is just a name. Just call it zooming or scope, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter. Now, is this something to be worried about? No. It used to be back in the beta, but it's not anymore. And here's why. Back in the beta, they did something with Smart Scope that hasn't been in past Halos. At least not the classic Halos. I'm pretty sure this feature is in Halo 4 and Halo 2 Anniversary with at least the BR, but let's not freak out about that. We're just going to worry about the classic Halos. Now, in the Halo 5 beta, when you zoom in with every weapon with a zoom, which is all the weapons now in Halo 5, which is its own discussion. I'm fine with it. Some people aren't. I'm not going to go too much into that aspect, but back to the zoom. When you zoom in, the reticle shrinks, your spread tightens, all your weapons are more accurate when zoomed. And people were afraid of this because they didn't want Halo to become too centered around zooming and long-range battles all the time, because people really want to focus on those mid-range battles that Halo is so known for with its BR gameplay. And hey, 343 said that the Smart Scope would not change anything from Classic Scope, and that was not true. However, since then they have amended this. As of, I believe, E3 or the Warzone gameplays. I'm not sure when they made this change, but they made the change. All the weapons now, except for 2. I've only seen 2 weapons that are still like the system in the beta. The Magnum and the shotgun, but everything else I've seen in all the gameplays, recent gameplays, Warzone gameplays, E3, Gamescom, even in the video documentaries, all the recent stuff shows classic Halo scope. You zoom in, you get descoped, obviously, and then your reticle stays that same size. There is no tightened spread. There is no more, more accurate when you're zoomed in. So that one gameplay changing aspect is gone. Except for 2 weapons. I'm sure they have special reasons. If they kept the Magnum and the shotgun with tightened spread when you zoom in, I'm certain they have their reasons. They wouldn't just leave those for no reason, but all the other weapons are back to the way you know them in classic Halo, unlike in Halo 4, which I'm pretty sure Halo 4's BR actually has the spread tightening feature, but let's just leave Halo 4 out of this. It's a visual thing. There's no need to freak out. If you were freaking out before, feel free to stop freaking out, because you no longer have a reason to freak out. If you don't like the way it looks, what can I tell you? It's going to look familiar to people outside of Halo, and I know people don't like that when 343 does something that potentially caters to other gamers, but Halo is not in the best place right now, and we need people to want to play our game. So if they see something that feels a little more close to home, like aiming down sights, they might be more inclined to play the game. Little do they know that scope functions exactly like the Halo Classic scope, and if they don't like that, then they might just leave anyway. Although I doubt that that would be a complete game breaker for anyone coming over from Call of Duty, right? Next on our list of Spartan abilities is something that I think is even less of an issue than, say, ground pound or the ADS. Maybe not less of an issue, but equally not an issue. Slide. Slide isn't even what you'd call an ability. It's just kind of a new thing to Halo, so they called it a Spartan ability. It's just a fancy name. It's not an ability, it's just a slide. And at first I saw this and I'm like, man, what is this, Call of Duty? Why would they put this in the game? But I played the game and I realized that slide isn't some super significant ability. They do design some aspects of the map around it, as you could see on the Fathom gameplays in the recent Halo 5 Invitational, but it's a non-issue. To me, things like slide and clamber and sprint are all part of this movement for more flow. I think 343 added something like slide to really push flow in gameplay. In the past, you're running, you hit the crouch, you kind of stop in place. Halo 5, you're running for cover, you hit the crouch, you slide into cover. It's all about the flow. This isn't going to be some super game-changing ability. I wouldn't be too worried if I were you. Just because it's something some other games have doesn't mean it's all of a sudden poison for Halo. Be calm. Slide is not worth worrying about, although the next two things I'm about to mention are the abilities that are a little more of a point of discussion than the ones I already mentioned. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to talk about clamber and sprint. Oh boy. Now, what about these is so controversial? These two abilities have a profound effect on how Spartans move, and have a profound effect on map design, and will undoubtedly change the core of Halo gameplay itself, more so than something like ground pound or visual aiming down sights. Now, clamber, I've not fully formulated my opinions on clamber. I'm not against it, but I do see some issue. People are concerned when it comes to skill jumps. What happens to skill jumps when we have clamber? Are they gone completely? Well, maybe. Just because clamber's in the game doesn't mean you can't have skillful jumping situations. There will still be situations that require precise timing to make a jump over to a ledge which you will clamber up. There will be situations where maybe there will be risky jumps in which, once again, you have to be precise in your timing in order to get to that ledge that you want to clamber onto. So are skill jumps completely gone? No. Are they maybe not quite as skillful as they used to be? Yes, and I could see why this is a concern. I see why this is an issue. I personally, once again, I have mixed opinions on it. I don't really know what to think yet. So, I don't have a lot to say right now, but I will say that if verticality is going to be implemented more into Halo's gameplay, this is the better way to do it. Look back to Jetpack in Halo Reach. Spartans were now able to move upward and onward more so than they could in the past. The problem? You can't design a map around Jetpack. In fact, Jetpack either breaks map design or is useless on a flat map. Not a good way to add more verticality into Halo. Clamber, however, you can design a map around clamber. That's the big difference. You can limit clamber, you can make it more useful in certain places. Jetpack is too random in your verticality. Clamber is much more controlled and can be used to design maps. So I see this as a better implementation of verticality for the Spartans. So in that regard, clamber is potentially a good thing. I'm still kind of undecided. Personally, I'm leaning towards Clamber being a good thing. Once again, just like the slide and sprinting, I think 343 is really pushing flow in Halo gameplay these days, and I think that's something a lot of FPS fans in general really want, is flow and fluidity and lots of movement, and I think that's why Clamber's in the game. And I'll be honest, I think Clamber is going to do a lot of good. I think it's going to attract a lot of attention for people who like high movement and who like flow and fluidity, and they don't like crouch jumps and skill jumps in the past, which, like I said, maybe it's not a good thing that those crouch jumps are disappearing, but we'll see. We'll see how things work out. Right now, I'm leaning towards Clamber being more of a good thing than a bad thing, but like I said, my opinions aren't fully formulated yet. Last but not least, Sprint, that one thing that everybody loves to discuss to no end, and with good reason. Let's go through the history of Sprint here for a second and go all the way up to why Sprint was not a good thing in Halo 4. But let's go back to Halo Reach first. Take a look at Sprint and Halo Reach. This is something I will always kind of criticize Bungie for, but they failed to fully implement it into their game. I'm sure they were uncertain about how people would react to it, so they put it as an armor ability, which means you had a choice to use it, but you could also not use it. It's in the game sometimes, and sometimes it's not an issue. They failed to fully implement it, and I really think they should have went one way or the other. Either make it in the game, because, let's be honest, so many people pick Sprint anyway. Your hologram ability is not going to help you against me if I have Sprint and I run to that power weapon quicker than you can. You need Sprint. It's an important part of getting to those power weapons, an important part of map movement. It affects map design. Sprint should have been not in Halo Reach or fully implemented, so shame on Bungie for only going half and half. Move on to Halo 4, everyone has Sprint, but did Sprint get any better as an ability? No, not in the slightest. In fact, it may have been worse because it was fully implemented without being improved. I'm going to present to you a scenario. Chaser and Runner are our two Halo 4 players. Chaser and Runner get into a BR battle or DMR battle, whatever, Magnum's weapon doesn't matter for this scenario. So, Chaser and Runner are fighting. Chaser starts to win that BR fight. Runner decides to turn his tail and run. So what happens? Runner is now escaping at a quicker speed than Chaser can chase him because Runner is sprinting. Now, in order to keep up, the Chaser has to sprint as well. This is where the issue comes in. Now, Chaser had to put his weapon down to keep up with Runner. So they're running at the same faster sprinted speed. They both have their weapon down, and this is a huge advantage to the Runner. Because although Chaser's keeping up with him, Chaser can't stop to shoot without losing his speed and potentially risking the Runner from escaping. And what's more, the Runner can keep running, and the Chaser can keep chasing. And if they keep doing this cat and mouse and they're all both running, Runner's going to get his shields back and he's going to be back to full health. At which case, Chaser's not going to be any better off than if he didn't chase and let the guy escape. So that's an issue. There are issues with Sprint, and I'm not even talking about map design here. I'm just talking about Sprint fundamentally was flawed. Go to Halo 5, where we have the best version of Sprint yet. When you're sprinting, you will not get your shields back. This is pretty big. That Runner will no longer be safe running and running and running, because now he's going to stay weakened that whole time. And even when he does stop, let's say he still escapes, Chaser stops chasing, he stops to shoot, Runner is evasive enough and makes it away. Oh well, sorry Chaser, but that Runner, as long as he's sprinting and running, he will not get his shields back, and even once he successfully escapes, his shield recharge delay is longer than the standard, which means he's out of the fight longer than he would be if he wasn't sprinting. So, those people who like to turn their tail and run, it's still possible, but it's a lot less viable, and sprinting is now more punishing towards those who choose to run. And I think this is great. I think this is wonderful. Best version of Sprint yet. I am leaning towards Pro Sprint. You gotta remember, I used to be anti-sprint. This scenario that I presented to you used to be the reason why I hated sprint and I didn't want anything to do with it. But Halo 5 has changed my opinions. I am more pro-sprint now. And I'm hoping that maybe I can convince some other people to be open towards it. But then there's always the issue of map design, and map design is a hard thing to discuss when it comes to sprint because there's a lot of misconceptions, and that's something that maybe I'll get into at a later date, as my opinions on it are not fully formulated regarding how map design is affected by sprint. Of course, if sprint is in the game, the maps are going to get bigger. Of course, that is just a thing that's going to happen. At the end of the day, I'm a little more pro-sprint than anti-sprint. You know, I'm not fully decided on some of these things, especially Clamber, but I really think the Spartan Abilities are going to be doing good for Halo. And here's the thing. Halo will never go back to the simple gameplay. Simple does not mean bad. Simple does not mean boring. But Halo cannot go back to that. It's just, there's no turning back. And of course, Bungie knew that Halo couldn't stay simple forever, which is why they started adding things like Sprint and Jetpack and these other things that changed the core movement and gameplay of what Halo is. And regardless of which developer's at the helm, I mean, armor abilities didn't last the test of time, and so did many other features, equipment, dual wielding, and like I said, armor abilities. They were in for a while, they didn't last. Will the same happen to Spartan Abilities? Who knows? Only time will tell, but here's something you have to remember. If Spartan Abilities go out the window, something will simply step in to take their place. Halo is never going back to the simple gameplay, and it can't afford to. It can't. That's completely my opinion on current matters. Simple just isn't going to cut it anymore, and you know what? 343 has to decide if we're going to make things more complex, if we're going to add more elements to the core gameplay and movement, how do we do that in the best way possible without completely ruining the game? And I understand that that's probably a very difficult thing for them. Like, can you imagine having to sort through all the arguments and discussions that we go through all the time, debating what's good and what's not? 343 has tough decisions to make, but one thing is for sure, Halo has to change, Halo has to evolve, and at the very least, it cannot go backwards. As Jamie Greisemer said himself in that Game Informer interview that I haven't talked about yet, which means I shouldn't be referencing it. Well, basically, he said his advice at 343. Let me give some context. First of all, I'm way ahead of myself. Jamie Greisemer is a former member of Bungie who was with them from the beginning. He's been working on all those Halo games from the past that Bungie made, and he says that 343 cannot move forward while looking back, or they're going to fall every time. And oh man, in that interview with Game Informer, he made a little comment about outdated mechanics and nostalgia. Thank God he didn't elaborate on that stuff, but that tells me he's been following the Halo struggle for maybe a little longer than he might have let on at first, especially if he makes little comments about outdated mechanics and nostalgia. But we're not going to talk about that, because that's when people start picking up pitchforks and lighting fires. But 343 has to move forward. Halo 4 was in the wrong direction. Halo 5 is hopefully taking us somewhere good, to a place where Halo can be revived. We're in the dirt right now, and I think Halo 5 is what we need. Oh, you know, I didn't even talk about Thruster Pack. Thruster Pack is also a non-issue to me. Map design isn't super centered around it, except for a few key jumps. I don't think it's an issue. It adds to the combat. I think it's a cool thing that was introduced in Halo 4. I think it was a very popular armor type in Halo 4, and I'm glad they expanded upon it. And I hate that people seem to think that they stole it from Advanced Warfare. Hello? Halo 4 released in 2012. Advanced Warfare released in 2014. Now, I apologize if there's a sudden change in audio quality here, but I had to come back and say something very important. Now, it might be an odd pill to swallow for some people, but Spartan Abilities go beyond competitive multiplayer. In fact, they have a very profound effect on campaign and custom games. And as far as those two sides of Halo are concerned, Spartan Abilities are going to do nothing but good for campaign and custom games. Literally, they can do nothing wrong. Campaign in Halo 4 didn't really do much to change in the way of gameplay. There were some new enemies, there were some interesting environments, but gameplay-wise, it didn't really stand out. This is going to change. Halo 5 is going to feel very, very different with these Spartan Abilities, with more verticality with the climbing, and the thrusting and the charging are really going to change. Up close combat, things are going to be pretty different with these abilities in Halo 5's campaign, and they can literally do nothing but good. And custom games as well. Not only can you take out the Spartan Abilities if you really want to, but these Spartan Abilities are going to open so many new possibilities in the way of custom games and all kinds of mini games and game types that revolve around these abilities. And trust me, those forgers are going to figure out how to make some kick-ass game types. So, although in multiplayer, the competitive online multiplayer, these abilities are highly debatable, when it comes to the game overall as a whole, Spartan Abilities really look like they're going to turn out to be something really, really great for this game. And campaign fans and custom game fans literally have nothing to worry about, no concerns whatsoever. They should be looking forward to these abilities the most. So all I can say is try to be open. I see hope. I see hope for Halo 5. I've said that a million times, but I'll say it again. Be open to what 343 has in store for the future. I believe this is Halo 5. The Halo community's rise out of the dirt. And I think we're going to go places. So thank you very much for listening. This has been the Spectral Force on Deliberating Halo.